in less than a week, episode 201, where we spoke about the military training exercise in Huron County, Ontario, became the third or fourth most viewed episode on all time for Don't Talk TV, and I think the most commented on. So I thought it was definitely a topic worth revisiting and doing a bit of a review of things that we've learned since that time of filming and now that the exercise has actually happened, and for me to respond to some criticisms or disagreements that came up in the comments box. Hello, my name is Nicholas Wansbutter. I'm a lawyer in Stratford, Ontario, Canada, and welcome to Don't Talk TV. So, as I discussed last week and had a look at, there was a Canadian Armed Forces exercise done by a 31 Canadian Brigade group in the Goderich, Huron County area of Ontario just last weekend, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th of May 2024. As I mentioned in the preamble, this is one of the most viewed and the most commented on episodes of all time of Don't Talk TV. So it's encouraging to me to see that Canadians still have a sensitivity to soldiers being on the streets in a time that we're not at war. It's something that historically Canadians, I think, have always been sensitive to, and I referenced my own experience back in the late 90s, where an exercise where it was proposed to put up checkpoints and stop vehicles was in fact cancelled because of the bad optics and the concerns that average Canadian citizens had over soldiers engaging, even as just a training exercise, that sort of activity on Canadian soil. So I thought it would be good to revisit this now that the exercise has actually happened. So firstly, I want to respond to a recurring theme that came up in the comments of people saying, no, this is normal. Didn't actually call me a conspiracy theorist, but I think the suggestion was there that I was being a bit alarmist. And then after responding to that, because I think it is important to respond to that, we'll look at what actually did happen, at least of what I've been able to gather. And if viewers have some information of their own, please share it. Please send us links or videos if you have any. We would love to see them, and maybe a further follow-up episode would be warranted if we get that. And then finally, I'd like to wrap that up with what we can learn from this, or I'll go straight to the spoiler, how this exercise demonstrates the validity of the Don't Talk TV position, that it's best to not even answer the door and not speak to agents of the state. And we'll see from the natures of the questions that were asked why I think that's the case. So firstly, let us go to a comment that came from another of individuals, and we welcome all comments. If people are willing to be reasonable and civil, we're happy to have people disagree with us. So I thank the individuals who did post and who felt that I was being a bit alarmist. And there was reference made to the ice storm in 1998, the floods in Manitoba also in the late 90s, I believe that was 97, where the military came out to help, and how this is a normal thing for the military to be aiding the civil powers. I think what's very important is the importance of context, and how we have to take the context of the situation into consideration. The flood in Manitoba in 1997, ice storm in Ontario and Quebec in 1998, that was in the pre-September 11th world. That was not in the current milieu that we operate in, where we've just finished, however you want to count the times of COVID, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. We've just finished a time period where people were locked down, where the military was used to not just operate vaccine clinics, but actively participated in psychological warfare against their own citizens. And I linked to a CBC article in the show description, but you can see here on screen that this isn't a wacky conspiracy theory. This is something that's been reported on by way of Freedom of Information Act requests by legacy media. I mean, and legacy media, the reason I would use them is because they're the last people who would lie or make up a conspiracy theory to say that our government is not just loving and doing everything for the benefit of its own citizens. Admitting these troubling use of psychological warfare tactics in social media, and then viewers may remember the fake wolf thing in the Maritimes. So we have that context. We also have that context of a government that has coerced people into vaccinations. And if you disagree with me that there is coercion going on, I recommend that you watch some of the previous videos, such as episode 51. Coercion doesn't just mean putting a gun to people's head. It means do this or you lose your job. Do this or you don't get to see your children. That's coercion. And previously in Canadian history, medical coercion was unheard of. Medical free choice was the rule of law. So we're in this milieu, this context, this environment where we have a government that does things like coerced vaccination, does things like invoking emergency powers for peaceful protests, to put a peaceful protest down because the ruling government doesn't like that people are protesting against their policies, or that invokes emergency powers over an eclipse, for goodness sakes. Now people say, oh, it's because there were so many people going to Niagara Falls to see the eclipse. Well, okay, that's an unusual situation, but it's not an emergency. The word emergency means nothing if that is what it's being used for. I mean, in the past, in order to invoke emergency powers, certain people had to at least do things like burn their parliament building down and say that was a terrorist act. Now all we need to have is a bit of snow and emergency powers are invoked. So in that context, that puts things in a totally different light. And just to further the context here, what was this exercise about? I have this from the Kincardine Record. This is an official announcement from the Ontario Provincial Police saying that the Huron County OPP will be working alongside members of the Canadian Armed Forces 31 Canadian Brigade Group during a training exercise named Trillium Venture May 3rd to 5th in Huron and Bruce counties. This exercise will enhance interoperability with the other government departments as they work together to respond to a simulated extreme heat scenario. So let me say that again. This is an extreme heat scenario is what was being trained for with these wellness checks. So that thoroughly situates this exercise in what I've just been talking about. When did you ever hear of government agents or the army doing wellness checks for, quote, extreme heat, unquote? And of course, keep in mind what's considered extreme heat. I mean, we have extreme heat warnings. I mean, pay attention to it this summer. I've noticed it for years now that when it's 30 degrees and 80% humidity, that's extreme heat warning. I mean, that's summer in Ontario. That's summers have always been like that as long as I've lived here, since 2008. But now that's an extreme heat emergency situation. So you can see, I mean, who's the conspiracy theorist here? Who's the alarmist? Is it the government that's maybe being alarmist and conspiracy theorist to think that they need to roll out the army for heat? Or is it Don't Talk TV for having some concerns about that? So I leave that for you to ponder and think about. But now let's look at what information we actually have of what occurred on the ground in Huron County. Now, as I say, I haven't been able to gather as much information as I'd like. I mean, we're very close to when it just occurred. I'm filming this on Monday, so maybe there'll be more information available during the week. We have some videos. I'm playing some video footage here. This is from a lady named Lynn Brooks, who runs a YouTube channel. So you can see some of what was going on in Hensel, Ontario. Now, Hensel is a small village. I think it's north of Goderich or east of Goderich. First of all, these are clearly Canadian Armed Forces members, and clearly reservists. And the way I know that they're definitely reservists is because of their headgear. They clearly belong to a couple of different Scottish regiments, because we see a couple of different hats. There are no regular force Scottish regiments or Highlander regiments currently in existence, so I know that these are reservists. These are regular Canadian Armed Forces uniforms. I've heard some reports of people saying they didn't think it was Canadian Army uniforms that they saw. With respect, I suspect that these are people who are simply not very familiar with what Canadian uniforms look like, perhaps also not familiar with the fact that the Canadian uniforms are of such a quality that they tend to fade very easily, so one soldier can look different from another. Everyone seems to be wearing the regular green CAD-PAT uniform that I saw in this video. Some of them may have been wearing the multicam colored variant of the CAD pat, so it's a digital camouflage pattern like this one we see here, which has been around since the early 2000s. The Army is phasing in a newer one that's more browns based on the well-known multicam pattern. Now from Huron County Freedom, I think this is a Facebook group, someone sent this to me. And first of all, I want to thank Karen Crowder, who we see at the bottom there, for referencing me. I think that's me that she's talking about there. Responding to someone who said that in Oshawa there was a similar exercise where the military was asking, do you own your own home? How many people live here? How many bedrooms do you have? Do you have extra provisions? Do you have a garden? Now, I haven't heard from anyone saying that questions quite like that were asked in Huron County. I would note that the government has access to all that information. I mean, certainly they would know whether you own your house. That could easily be looked up. Census data, we've talked about the fact that there's a mandatory census in Canada. They would probably have an idea of that. If the government really wanted to know how many people were in your house, and if you have Wi-Fi, I don't have Wi-Fi in my house, but most people do, they can use Wi-Fi to determine how many people are in the house and where they are within the house. So this is all information the military could have, although it is certainly handing the information to them in a very nice, easy to access package if you were to answer all those questions and just give all that information to the military members knocking at your door. Although in an exercise like this, I highly doubt that these reservists knocking on your door are actually recording the information that you give them, if you gave them any, if you happen to live in Goderich and encounter these individuals. Now, I've spoken to people who I know personally who live in the area who did encounter these soldiers. They chose to answer the door. Not my advice, but I mean, it's advice. You're welcome to take it or not take it. Honestly, I may have answered the door myself out of curiosity because this is a simulation, not the real deal. Although I do believe that you should train the way that you intend to behave in the actual scenario, but I'm not condemning anyone if they did answer out of curiosity to see what they had to say. And what I was told is that they were asking, are you ready for an ice storm? Which is interesting when they're training for extreme heat wellness checks. But anyway, that was the question that I was told was asked. And then, interestingly, this emergency preparedness little bookmark thing was handed out with an emergency survival kit checklist from the government of Ontario, saying that people should have all these various things: flashlights, first aid kit, candles, important papers like identification, clothing and footwear, blankets, food, whistle to attract attention, with the motto, be prepared, not scared. Now, in principle, I think this is the exact sort of thing that the government should be promoting among people, that people should be prepared. It's just a good thing to do. What I find really interesting about this is just a few short years ago, this was crazy tinfoil hat conspiracy stuff to be prepping like that. I mean, people in the government in particular would ridicule you as recently as 5 or 6 years ago if you were doing any prepping. That, you're a crazy conspiracy theorist, you're maybe even a terrorist or potential terrorist, a danger to the government. So I find it highly interesting that now all of a sudden the government is now telling us that we should prep, and we're not crazy and potential terrorists if we do. I'm not really sure why they are having this different tone on this topic all of a sudden. Personally, I highly doubt that this is because something is coming, because with all due respect, the track record of our government in the last number of years is not exactly the track record of people who really care about the citizens in the country and care about their welfare. But that's my personal viewpoint. Many may disagree with that. They may feel that our government is always acting in our best interests and truly love the people of Canada. If you think so, feel free to tell me that I'm full of it and that that's what you think in the comments box. Now that does bring me to my final point of lessons we can learn, or how I take from this fortification in my position that it's better to not even answer the door in the first place and not speak to these individuals when they come asking these sorts of questions. So let's just take the "are you prepared for an ice storm" question. Now, if you answer the door, you have 3 options. You can say, yes, I am prepared, no, I'm not prepared, or 3, no, it's none of your business. Well, if you say yes, now they know, okay, this house has stuff. They have food, they have flashlights, they may even have guns. If you say no, now they know, okay, this place doesn't have stuff. I mean, of course, you might lie about that. I don't recommend lying, but generally they're probably going to think if you say no, okay, they don't have anything here. These people just aren't prepared. If you say none of your business, or I choose not to answer, now they really know you're totally prepared, because that's the only person who's going to answer that way. And you're going to draw a bunch of suspicion to yourself if you answer 2 out of those 3 ways. That's why, in my view, it's better to not even answer the door, so they just have no clue. They just don't know. That's the not your business answer, is to not answer the door. And I personally think that in the current milieu that I referenced in the first part, that is the way to go. But that's my personal recommendation. It's not legal advice, because these videos are not legal advice. If you need legal advice, you need to speak to a lawyer about the specifics of your situation. So if you want me to be that lawyer, my contact information is listed below. We really enjoyed all of the discussion back and forth in the comments and the information shared in the comments box in our last episode, so please keep that coming. And if there's anything you'd like to see us cover on this channel, please leave a comment in the comment section or send an email to the email address listed below. And if you found this video at all interesting, helpful, or informative, please consider liking, sharing, subscribing, and following us on social media.